All right, and here we have the base of the printer. And what's nice about the CR6 is that they've really cleaned it up and put the power supply inside. So this makes it definitely cleaner and more professional looking. And here we can see under the printer, it's very nice looking. I love the attention to detail on all of these panels here. Now this, what you see here is actually the tray. There's a tray in here and it comes out right here out of this corner. And actually there's stuff in it and it's very nicely presented. So it looks like we have a little spatula and some extra parts and tools in there. Actually, before we assemble the gantry, we need to check that this bed here is not wobbling, and I moved mine around a bit and I can see that it's not tight. So looks like we're gonna have to adjust the eccentric nuts, and hopefully you guys can see they're right in there, and there's two of them. So on one side there's just a hard point, and then on the other side there's eccentric nuts, and that's going to bring the wheel closer or farther away on the rail here. So it's a little bit hard to get in there because, you know, there's quite a small space here, but if it's not too small, you can definitely get your fingers in there. And I can feel on the front wheel my drag is good, but on the back one it's completely loose. So the one back there is the one I need to tighten up a bit. So I'm just going to go in there with my wrench. I'm going to turn it just a bit. And what you want to do is you want to have barely lightly compression against the rail. If you do it too tight, the wheels will wear out really quick under there. And if it's too loose, it'll wobble. So the best way is just to grab a wheel and then turn it with your finger. If it's got a nice little friction to it, then it's good. So it looks like I need to tighten it up just a little bit more back here, and we should be good to go. All right, so that feels really good. And I've eliminated my wobble completely, so it's rock solid. And you want to go back and forth, make sure you're nice and smooth. If you feel any kind of jerking or bumpiness in the track, that means you're probably too tight. And also, while you're checking this, make sure your belts are running true on the pulleys. And if they're not, you will need to adjust that. So on this printer, the belts are actually tensioned with this little knob here. So you spin it counterclockwise, it loosens it. And then when you tighten it, it tightens the belt. But be careful to over tighten it, because this doesn't feel like you're doing much, but it's starting to get very tight here. So you want to be really light on the belt. You don't want to be too tight. It just needs to be tight enough where it's not having a slop in it. So tighter is not always better, especially with rollers and belts. But they got to be tight enough though. All right, so that feels really good. All right, so that brings us to step one. So step one is going to be connecting the gantry to the base, and there are two M545 hex bolts on each side, and that's these in this little baggie here. So they're quite long, and there's 4 of them. And it looks like here we also have a tensioner knob that probably goes somewhere. All right, so the best way I've learned to do this is just grab the gantry and set it on top where it needs to go. Put this thing to the side a bit. And then we're going to simply grab our bolt, pick up the machine to the side, and start the bolt underneath. So this definitely works out quite good and not too hard to do, and you don't have to flip the whole printer over or anything weird like that. So we're going to run these down but not tighten them, because we got to do the other side too. All right, let's flip it around. Same here, we can pick it up and start our bolts. And we can go ahead and snug these up really good on this side. Go back to the other side and get these nice and tight. Now you might want to go ahead and go around the printer and check all the bolts, because they do tighten them up really good at the factory, but checking them is always a good idea. Make sure they're nice and snug. So one of these was quite loose. Yeah, this one's very loose. So there's 4 more on the other side. And these are very tight, so that's good. Now there are some more bolts that are underneath, and these are quite important. If these are loose, the y-axis can wobble back and forth, so definitely check these underneath and make sure they're nice and snug. So mine seem to be okay, but still need a little more tightening. And the reason you want to go through all that is because you don't want to have the machine fluctuating on the frame, because that will offset the nozzle. So you want to make sure all the frame pieces are nice and snug. And also on top, we can snug these up also. Okay, so step 2 is installing the screen, and that simply just goes right here on the right side of the printer. And the bolts can be found in this little packet. They're M5 by 10 millimeter. So we're gonna grab our screen, lay it over the channel, and start the bolts. So yeah guys, overall you can see that this printer is not very hard to assemble so far. So if you're just getting started, this would be a very friendly printer to put together. Since we are on the screen, let's go ahead and plug our connector into it. And there's just a wire coming out from the side here, and it'll simply clip underneath, just like that. So for step 3, we are going to install the spool holder. And the spool holder goes on the left side of the printer if you're looking at it. And it's quite an interesting design for sure because it is an injected molded piece. And then we also have like a little swivel, so the whole arm swivels back and forth. So quite interesting, but it looks like there's no hardware required to install this. So let's go to the side of the printer. So according to the manual, it looks like it hooks right in front of the channel. So not where the motor behind, but in front of it. And hopefully you guys can see this, but it's got a little lip here. So it just kind of clips on, and as you go down, it clips into the bottom one. So there's also a foot here that helps with the vibrations and the weight. A very nice design, and it swivels away where you can, tuck it, or it's not in the way when you don't want it. And then when you need it, open it right up. So naturally our holder will go this way towards the back because this is where our filament will feed. So it's gonna go from here into the filament detector and then into the extruder. So naturally it'll go right here. And that's it, quite a simple and elegant design. All right, so we're making some progress. So for our next step, we have the little handle that goes on the top. I guess you can carry the printer around with. And that's this guy here. And we're gonna use the same bolts that we used for the screen that have T-nuts. So the bolt will go through the handle. And on the other end, we're gonna start the T-nut. And same thing for the other side. And you guys can see how the T-nuts go. So what that's gonna do is it's gonna go into the channel and then spin and lock it in. All right, so we're gonna put these straight so they can go inside the channel. So we're gonna try to center it up. And so what you wanna do is you wanna go backwards a bit and then start tightening it. And the T-nut should turn inside the channel and grab it. All right, so we're gonna snug these up really good. And that's it, and now we have a handle. Now, I'm not sure how good of an idea this is to have a handle here to pick up the printer, but I guess it is quite convenient if it's on the ground. You don't have to lean over to grab it. But technically, you could just grab it around here, but they do include this little handle, and we can pick it up. So, but it does make our printer a little bit taller. So if that's an issue, you can technically not install it. All right, so since we're up here, let's go ahead and look at our gantry. So what we want to do here is we want to check all our wheels here also. Make sure they are not too tight. And we want to move this all the way down to make sure. And it looks like mine are a little bit tight. So on the Z-axis, we have 2 adjustable eccentric nuts, which are on the inside. So you're basically going to adjust them the same way we did with the bottom on the plate. You want them to spin just a bit, but not be too tight. But these are not too critical because they don't move too much up and down. Now, what is critical is the hot end. And speaking about the hot end, it's missing the tensioner. And that's this guy here that was in the bag with the bolt. And it looks like all we need to do is just install it. And I'm guessing they took this off because of the width of this thing was just too wide. So again, guys, you don't want to be too tight on that. Be very light on it. And here you can see the 3 wheels that the hot end rides on. And it's definitely too loose. It's moving around. I'll raise this up just a little bit. We're going to grab our wrench and we're going to adjust this thing till it's right. And what we're going to do is we're going to judge it by the 2 top wheels. And we want to have just a little bit of friction and no wobble. And these look like they're perfect. So I can spin it with my hand and there's a decent amount of friction. It's still quite easy to turn, and this is where you want, because we want a really smooth motion. So for the last few things, all we need to do is plug in some connectors, and there's actually only a few. There's these 2 stepper motors. So quite simple, one here and then one on this side. And then we have a large main wire. And it has 2 plugs on it. There's one about halfway, and that one will go right here, and that's a junction box where everything is distributed to the end-stop switches and the motors. So that'll plug in right here just like that. And the other end goes to the hot end, which is here right on top. You can see there's a plug, and that just simply plugs right into there, just like that, and it clips in. Now there are some, looks like cable ties of some sort that were already on here, and I think we can just put that around the PTFE tubing, put around it, and then twist it. And it locks it in. It's just to keep the cable from sagging, and also, as it travels, they'll travel together. So, all right, so that looks pretty good right there. Actually, guys, there is one more plug that we need to plug in, and it's right here. And this is actually for this Z-axis sensor, and it's one of those optical looking ones, not a mechanical one. So that's interesting because the rest of them have the actual mechanical ones. In any case, so let's go ahead and plug this thing in. And that's the extent of plugging everything in. Now there is one more thing you want to check before you power your printer on, especially if you have 230 volts, is you want to see and make sure that your power supply is switched to the correct voltage in the back. So as you guys can see, mine is actually on 230, which is the wrong voltage because I'm on 115. So I'm going to go ahead and switch that to 115. Now there's less danger of having 230 than 115, because if I would have forgot to do this, my printer would just probably run funny or not run at all. Now if you're on 230 volts and you had 115, then you could probably damage the power supply and whatnot else. So it's good that it's on 230, but it's good to check, make sure you have the right voltage set. So if you look over here, you can see that there's a little blue clip that holds the coupler, and the couplers on here are actually plastic, which is interesting. And that's these extra pieces that they came with. It actually comes with those little couplers. But what I noticed is that we don't have one of these clips over here, and I'm not sure if it needs to be there or not, but I'm gonna go ahead and put one in there. And basically what that does is it pulls on the coupler, and that makes it where the PTFE tubing is not going to move very easily in and out. So you want to have this, because when you do retractions, if your PTFE tubes moves with the filament, it won't retract correctly. So make sure your PTFE tubings are nice and tight. All right, and so just like that, guys, the printer is built. I want to take a closer look at this thing in detail. So let's go ahead and start with this build plate here. So you guys can see that there's two latches here. And this is definitely an interesting way. Definitely not what Creality used before, but it does seem simple and robust. So when you undo these, the glass should go up. Okay, so there is a certain position they have to be in for the glass to go up. But in any case, once you get that, it does go out, and it should slide out, but it does have a hard time doing that. So I guess you're not going to be doing that all the time, obviously. So, and it was upside down. The Creality was on the other side, but the back side is just plain glass. And on top of it, it's actually a perforated build, something like Ultra Base, and it has these little dimples, so when they heat up they grab, and when they cool off the prints just pop off. So this can be a plus or a minus, and the reason it could be a minus is because if the printer is turned off during printing, you got a chance of your model popping off when it cools off. But overall, this kind of build platform is usually a huge plus because it makes printing so much easier, and prints just stick so well to it. But then when it cools off, they just come right off. All right, so I'm gonna try to slide this plate back in, and we can go ahead and lock it in just like that, and we're ready to go. All right, so let's take a closer look at it. We'll start from the top here. So we got a handle, got a nice logo. The finish on these channels are really nice because it's smooth and it's a really refined look. So now looking on the back of it, we can see that we have a dual Z-axis leads, and they are tethered here on the top with a belt. And I really like this design because the motors on the bottom are always in sync through that belt, and that makes it where you don't have any kind of imperfections between the two sides. So that's a great design there. We do have bearings that the Z-rod goes through, and if you guys notice, the channels on the back side are also got a nice flat clean surface. So as we go down, we have the extruder assembly here, and if you see this extruder, it's quite different looking than what we're used to. So it looks like it's a different implementation of how it works, but we'll have to look into it a little bit closer. But it seems like you put your filament in there and then you lock it in, I think is what you do. And that brings the gear under pressure, but we'll check that out once we feed the filament in. And we have a stepper motor here that drives the extruder. So here we have a filament detector, and it's quite a large one. So I'm not sure exactly what kind that is, but it's probably an optical one, but we will be able to hear it once we put our filament in. If it clicks, it's mechanical. So below that, we have a junction spot over here where all the wires kind of come in and go out. Here we have the X-axis stepper motor, and our X-axis limit switch is inside this box. So if we keep going down, we can see our stepper motors for Z-axis, and there are 2 of them. And then there's this large main cable that comes out and has a really nice looking bracket right here that it holds to the channel. And the cable has this nice braided feel and look to it. Really like this design. So you guys seen already the spool holder. Very cool that it moves in and out, kind of tucks away and you don't need it. So here we have the heated bed. So we do have the Ultra Base glass, and then we have the aluminum. But underneath the aluminum, we don't have any insulation, so probably not a huge deal for this kind of bed size. But what is awesome is this cable connection here to the bed. It's very robust, and we got like this flexible end here to help absorb movement, because this thing does move back and forth quite a lot. And the cable goes down and into the base of the printer where all the electronics are. So all the channels have these caps at the end of them, so they're not sharp. Very nice touch. We got the same kind of caps here on the top. So here in the back we have the Y-axis motor, and it's all covered here where the pulley is and the end-stop switch. So servicing this thing might be a little bit hard if you ever needed to adjust something, but technically shouldn't be too hard, just have taking off this little cover here. So we do have a sticker here that tells us what kind of printer this is, the print size, the wattage, and the weight, which is 9.5 kilograms, which is actually quite a heavy machine. But this thing does have a lot of quality materials on it. All right, and so as we come along this way, we can see that here we have the switch to power on the machine and the power outlet that is fused. And after that, we have the screen. It's a really nice size, and it is a touch screen. And as we go to the front, we can see this is where our drawer is. A little toolbox. And another thing to mention is the Y-axis rail is actually quite wide. That makes the bed a lot more stable. So as you guys saw earlier, we got adjustable pulleys here for the belt tensioning. And over here on this side, we have the SD card insert with also a USB connection. Again, I really like these feet. They're very nice for this printer. Now another thing, guys, if you look under the bed, if you notice, you can't see any kind of adjusting knobs. So there is no knobs to adjust the level of the bed. So it's preset to just one level, so there's no way to go up and down. Now, and the reason for that is because this printer has something quite special, and that is underneath there. So the hot end itself is the leveling sensor, which is definitely an interesting way to do it, and I'm definitely excited to see how that works. But it is a pressure style sensor, so whenever there's any kind of pressure going on the tip, it feels it and registers it as a switch would. So it looks like we have a little LED over there to one side, and the other side we have the parts cooling fan. And there is a silicone sock around the heat block. And the hot end is all inside this metal housing. Looks like we have a small fan for the heat break. And here, guys, we can see a little better from the back side what the heat break looks like. So it looks like they went with a different cooling design for this CR6. All right, so for the next part, let's go ahead and power it on and make sure everything works. And I'm pretty excited to see how this out of bed leveling works with the sensor being the tip itself. So that's quite interesting. So I got the cord connected. I'm gonna hit the power button and it powers on. There's a little Creality logo here and a load bar. All right, so loaded, and the fans came on, and you can definitely hear them. They're not crazy loud, but they are on. And so the first thing that jumps out is this beautiful display. So we're gonna take a closer look at that in a second. But before we do anything, let's go ahead and home the machine so we know all of our motors and sensors are working. So I'm gonna click on Prepare, Move, and Home. And it is going X, Y, and now Z is coming down. And by the way, guys, it is ultra quiet. Like, you can't hear it, it's whisper quiet. Only thing you can hear are the fans. And that's a really huge plus because it really eliminates the stepper motor whiny sounds. All right, so the printer homed and everything seems to be working, so that's good. So let's take a closer look at our display, and the home button is actually right in the middle. So let's go back all the way to the home screen. So we got a nice Creality logo. Here we have some main functions: prepare, control, and level. And down here it shows continuously all of our printer status: the hot end temperature, the bed temperature, the speed, and the Z-axis. So we're gonna click print whenever we're ready to print files. And you can see there's nothing there. Prepare is where all of our tools are. We were in the move, feed, and return. So this is controlling the extruder. Then we have disable steppers, preheat PLA, preheat ABS, and cool down. So let's go ahead and click preheat PLA. That is going to preheat to is 185 and 45 on the bed. So let's go back while it's preheating. So under control, we got temperature controls, and this is where we can adjust our heating. We can turn the fans on and off. Here we can set up the PLA settings, so if you want to set your custom temperatures, you can do that here. That's really nice that they have that option. We can turn our LED on and off, and as we do that, I'm going to leave it off. So it looks like language is set to English. That's all there is. Then we have a restore to factory settings and an info button here, so I guess that's about the machine. All right, and the last thing is level. Now I don't know if I should be doing the level since we just preheated the nozzle and the bed, since it does use the nozzle to level. So let's go ahead and go to prepare and then cool down, so it'll cool off a bit. And after that, I'm going to hit the level button. I just want the nozzle to go down a bit before it, starts poking the bed. And it might be smart enough for that anyways. So let's go ahead and try it, see what it does. So click level. So we have our offset 0.5 millimeters right now. So the Z-axis offset is what you're going to use to offset your nozzle from the bed, because it's the only control you have, and technically the only control you need. So if you need to go a little closer or a little farther, you will use these in increments of 5. Well, I guess 0.05. So, all right, so let's click the outer leveling, and it does say to wait for the nozzle to get to 120. So it is smart enough to know not to put a hot nozzle into the bed. I'm really happy to see that kind of attention to detail. All right, so it is 117 temperature and it's starting to go. Okay, so it actually touches the bed and takes its measurement like that. Really cool. Thinking about this, guys, this might be the best way to do this, because not only will it be always accurate since it's the nozzle, there should be a lot less issues with this kind of leveling compared to something that's external. And we can see there's a little light that blinks inside. Maybe I can get it from this angle here, but you can kind of see the little blue light inside. So every time it pressure senses the bed, it lights up. That's when it knows to go to the next. So it double taps it twice. It's got 1 and then 2, and then it moves to the next one. So it looks like it did all 16 points and it's done. And simple as that, the bed is leveled. So that's really, really nice and easy. And so far this printer is quite flawless.